You're listening to the Chelsea Holm podcast, where high-functioning Christian women come to lay down performance, pick up presents, and finally come home to who God created them to be. I'm Chelsea, the wife coach, mindset trainer, and your guide back to God-first living, soul-deep peace, and restored connection in your marriage, your motherhood, and identity. If you've been holding it all together on the outside while unraveling on the inside, you're in the right place. Let's breathe deep and begin.
Oh my gosh, we need to talk about emotional immaturity and overall emotional intelligence, because I am hearing time and time again that, the women I'm working with, their husbands are extremely emotionally immature. And I'm sorry if you're that husband and you're listening to this. This is your altar call to go look in the mirror and find your blind spots, or ask somebody that is going to speak truth to you to help you reveal those blind spots. Because we cannot continue to grow until we come to the point that we recognize our emotional immaturity and we create this immense awareness of how we are being the problem. I was talking to my husband about this the other day, because I always bring him into my coaching, and not that I'm coaching him, but, I ask his insight because, we're a team here and we've walked through these things, and I'm going to share a little bit of our story too about, this emotional maturing process, and so I just asked him, I said, what I'm seeing a lot, and this was our experience too, is that, a wife will initiate early in the day. And I did this too. I remember this one specific time we were at Walmart, and I walked up to my husband and I whispered in his ear, and I was like, hey, let's get it on later. And I could kind of see there were some walls at the time too of not wanting to trust it, because I had rejected him so many times and built him up and then let him down. But he wasn't walking in emotional maturity. And so then later that day, when I was like, oh, I'm too tired now, he reacted out of frustration and anger. And, and then of course I reacted out of guilt and compulsion and just forced myself to carry it out, right? Even though I really was tired, and there was a lot of elements that come into this, right? It's not black and white. It's very there are so many layers to emotional intelligence, and it's not just an action, right? It's all the layers that are underneath. And I had to come to this awareness that why were we in these patterns? He had to come to this awareness too. But to really go deep and to go hard and to get super brutally honest with ourselves of where am I the problem? What do I need to change in the current processes and patterns that we have, where, and this is one thing I want you to understand, right? We have these known discomforts, right? There are these comforters of, it's uncomfortable, but because it's something that we're familiar with, we want to hold on to it and keep it. And so let me explain a little bit. So we would have these processes where I would ignore my emotions and my feelings because I was strong and I would just tough it out, and I can take it, I can handle it, right? I'm a big girl. And what would happen is they would build and build and build and build until my husband would start to notice that I was disconnected and not present, or extremely anxious, or just all the things, and so he would lean in and be like, what's the matter? Nothing, of course. I'm fine. Everything's fine, was my response. And, eventually, because my husband loved me and he cared, he would keep pushing in until I would explode all over him with all of the things that I had been holding on to, right? And so what would happen is then he would lean in and give me the emotional intimacy that I was craving. And then once I got that, then I would give him the physical intimacy that he was craving. And so we both got a result that we wanted, but the process sucked and the process hurt us both. And so we had to be able to recognize, where am I the problem in this process? And how can we get the same results but completely change the process so that we're both winning as one and not hurting each other to get what we want, right? So we had to be able to recognize this known discomfort, this comforter blankie that we were wrapped up in that was strangling us. We had to throw it off, and we had to create new patterns. But that only happens when we have a willingness to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to change? Where am I the problem in this situation? And so back to, I was asking my husband some insight on this situation that one of my clients was having where, she had initiated, set it up for the day. And then they had this big fight. And so this is where, as the coach, their process was exposed. That old patterns were them fighting, and then he would get what he wanted because she would quickly try to fix the situation, usually through physical intimacy, but it would be at her expense. And so my husband said, because she has walked through this emotional regulation, because she's at peace, she's relaxed, and she's not engaging in that fight. She's present and loving him, but she's not engaged. It's really hard to fight with somebody who won't engage back with you, not because they're giving you the silent treatment, but because they are at peace and totally calm, right? Like, this is literally what parenting is. We have an emotionally dysregulated child because they haven't learned those skills yet, and we are here to help teach them how to learn those skills, but we don't lower ourselves down to the emotional immaturity of our children. Most parents do, and that's a big problem, especially with teenagers. And so what we do, and so my husband and I were walking through this, and he goes, because so then later she was like, I'm really tired because she had, done all this work to put the kids to bed and everything. And by the time she got to bed, she was tired. Okay. Now, again, there are a lot of layers to this, but his immediate reaction was anger, frustration, throwing a fit, and pouting, emotionally immature. And my husband said, here's the thing. Is it really that she rejected and denied him? Or is it that earlier in the day, when he picked a fight with her, going through an old broken process that gets results that hurt everyone, is it that he was the one who put no out there and brought the disconnect? And I was like, oh, like he said it better, of course, because my husband always says everything better, and I just love that about him. Like, he just has such a way with words, and I was like, oh, snap, right? Because it comes back to our emotional intelligence and our emotional maturity. And we can only grow spiritually to the ceiling of our emotional intelligence. Okay? A great resource for this is Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Pete Scazzaro, because we are not taught how to be emotionally mature. We're not. And most of the time, I would probably say 99% of the time, our examples, parents, grandparents, adults of any kind, right? Look at the media world, for Pete's sakes. Look at all of that. We don't have good examples. We don't have examples of emotionally healthy people. And so we are also battling the fact that we don't know what we don't know. Right? And so that's where I am here to kick you in the face with love so that you look in the mirror, so that you have awareness, so that you can identify your blind spots, so that you can stop these old patterns that are leaving you both hurt, even though you're in a sick way getting what you want, right? Like, we wouldn't do these things if we didn't get something out of it, right? It's like, you are taking care of your temple and you're stewarding it well, right? Your body. But you're stuck in this pattern that every single time you feel emotionally unstable, you go and stuff your face with food because you're getting something out of it, right? It feels good for the moment, but then we have these back-end regrets that I've talked about so many times. And so really what this is about is, are you willing to look in the mirror and have radical awareness? And if you're unwilling to look in the mirror and have radical awareness, you need to understand that you are perpetuating the problem. And it is going to be highlighted when your wife works with me and she has a regulated nervous system and she is calm and she is present and she is relaxed and she is deeply who God made her to be, and she's thrown off these existing known discomfort comforters, right? It's going to highlight your emotional immaturity, and that is not going to feel good. Okay, this is what happened for my client and her husband. And, it led to him actually going through her phone and seeing our Voxer coaching threads. And he wasn't happy about what he saw. And here's the thing, because I asked myself, I was like, well, because this is about awareness, right? And holding that mirror up, I said, is there anything that I said in there that was not accurate or true? Because I'm not here to coach him, I'm here to coach her, right? It's about her being able to show up no matter what is coming at her, right? Standing completely rooted and secure on the rock, no matter what's going on around her, right? No matter what triggers are present, no matter what's coming at her, the hurt, all of that, right? It's about her being able to process through all of that. It's about her healing and her wholeness. Okay, and so he didn't like what he saw because I said, your husband is reacting emotionally immature. He's very emotionally immature, and he didn't like seeing that. But what? Here's the thing: because he has the Holy Spirit working in him, he was able to step back and be like, after some time, right, and after he cooled off, he was able to see like, wow, you're right. I had no idea that I was doing this. And my client, she was like, I have been dealing with this unhealthily for our whole marriage. And she's like, you're absolutely right. Like, the fact that I am so secure and free and like,
Hey friend, if this conversation is hitting home and you're ready to stop surviving and start rebuilding, I want to invite you into my world of coaching. Whether you're navigating disconnection in your marriage, burnout in your body, or just craving something real again, I've got free trainings, tools, and one-on-one spaces to walk with you. Head to chelsea.coach/book your call or DM me the word call and let's figure out your next best step.
Able to have conversations and not be reactive, but to be expressive, wrapped in love. Like, she's like, it definitely highlighted his immaturity, and that was really uncomfortable because growth is uncomfortable, right? Because growth means that we are seeing the curtains are being pulled back and we're like, ooh, yeah, there's a lot of weeds in there. We got to pull out, right? Like, we got to do some reconfiguring because, we planted the melons next to the cucumbers. Okay, if you know anything about gardening, you're not supposed to do that. I didn't know that. Years ago in Pennsylvania, I planted a garden, and I didn't know that you can't plant certain things next to each other, and the cucumbers were horrible, like horrible, and the melons didn't grow. The cucumbers were the most bitter things I've ever tasted in my life. Like, I learned that lesson. But this is the case that happens with growth is we learn our shortcomings. We learn our blind spots, and it hits us in the face and kicks us in the teeth, and we have to decide, well, what am I going to do with this information? Am I going to change? Am I going to challenge myself? Am I going to commit to being intentional to changing these things? Am I going to understand that it's like having training wheels on at first, and it's going to be weird and wonky, and I'm going to want to let my bike fall sideways and lean on hard on that training wheel, but I've got to learn how to do this. And so I wanted to share with you like a couple examples of I already shared the one example of exploding all over my husband, but we would have other discussions that were like off topic for us. So this is another example for you. So we would have these hot topics that every time we talked about them, like we could not have a conversation because we would both get angry or hurt or upset. And so we just decided like those are things we just can't talk about. Imagine that, right? Like we're one in marriage and yet we have things that we can't talk about. Like what is that? And can you relate? I know you can because this is like, I don't know, 100% of marriages, I imagine. Unless you have walked through this journey too, and now you're on the other side. So now, my husband, we were all together for Easter this weekend or this last weekend. I know when you're listening to this, it's probably a few weeks ahead, or a few weeks later. He just looked at me and he was like, there's nothing we can't talk about. He's like, we can literally talk about anything now because we are emotionally mature and we have grown through this. And, we both have like indicators that we'll say to each other Because my husband can get very passionate, and when he gets passionate, he gets louder and he gets closer, and I'll be like, honey, I know you're not meaning it to hurt me, but your words are getting a little sharp and pokey, and that's his cue to, and he'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just getting passionate, and I'll bring it back down, kind of thing, and he doesn't take it personally, or he's not offended by it, right? He doesn't demand his way, like go to Corinthians, the love chapter, like these are all biblical principles, and I think the biggest thing for me was, I would always hurry to fix things at my own expense and forcing them out of obligation rather than from a place of love and security and safety. And so a lot of this was like trying to control his emotions because I couldn't face my own quote unquote negative emotions like anger and sadness and fear and shame and all of those things. And so I definitely didn't feel comfortable when he was feeling frustrated or angry or whatever or sad. And so I couldn't hold space for myself. I definitely couldn't hold space for him. And so I would immediately try to fix things, taking on his emotional regulation on myself where I couldn't even emotionally regulate. And so that was like our pattern in the past. And so, over time, and I learned this from other generations too, that like, just shut down, just don't say anything because that's safer than saying something that you don't know how to handle. Right. And he learned like, say all the things so that it's all out there, no matter what. Unfortunately, it hurts, right? And he doesn't hide his emotions, whereas, I was always someone who very much hid my emotions. And so we had to learn a few things, right? We had to be able to look in the mirror and challenge ourselves. Where do I need to change? What in me needs to change here? What are the processes that I'm using that are hurting us both? What do I need to shift? Okay. And so a couple other helpful things specifically for us that has worked really well is having a oneness vision. As in, we are one, we are on the same team, we are for each other, we are fighting against a very real enemy out there, but it's not between us. We are working together. We're going in the same direction. So taking on that vision, that shared vision together of where we're going and what we're doing and who we are, right? And then the second thing is to always assume the best of each other. This was a radical shift for us because most of us, and you listening, you probably always assume the worst of your spouse. Like, he left his socks on the floor. He must hate me. He must really disregard all the work that I do and want me to do extra work. What? That's so ridiculous. He left his socks on the floor because he got hot and he took his socks off and then he fell asleep and then he forgot them, right? Like, all of those things. Of course, can he work on that area? Sure he can. But I'm not his Holy Spirit, and I'm not in control of him in that. But I am in control of how I choose to see him and what I choose to assume about him and think about him, right? My perspective of my husband. So looking at my husband through the eyes of Jesus, Jesus, show me how you see him. He is your son. He is your child. You love him. You created him. You need him together, right? And you are working in him, and you are not done with him yet, just like me, okay? But always assuming the best. What does that actually mean? What it has meant for us is asking for clarification if something is not perceived the right way. And so an example of this would be like my husband. So this weekend, he came home on Friday night, and we were having a birthday party for Ruth. Today's her birthday, as I'm recording this. And, I don't do elaborate parties, but there's definitely a lot of moving parts, and it's more about like people feeling welcome and fed and just having a good time. Like, it's not about the aesthetics or anything like that, but I do like to at least have a clean-ish house, right? Like bathrooms, I want to make sure those are clean for people. I want to make sure that, we don't have a bajillion toys and grossness all over that people just can't come and feel comfortable in, right? But it does need to be sterile. So anyway, so I asked my husband, I said, hey, I've got a list. I made a list of some things that need to get done before the party tomorrow. You think you could help me on that? And he said, well, I've got some things on my list that I need to get done this weekend before I head back to Kansas. And I was like, Aw. And so in the past, I would have been really upset. And my perspective would have been, of course you have all of these things to do because you never help me, right? Which is not true, right? And so, like, how quickly our brain goes to the negative and assumes the worst. And so in this moment, I just took a breath and I said, okay. And he's like, we have 5 children. Okay, well, 4 if we're not making the birthday girl prep for her own party. I don't know. He's like, who can do these things? And I was like, well, they're not going to do them as well as you. And he's like, you're right. They're not going to do them as well as you either. But how are we going to teach them these things? And I was like, you're absolutely right, And so just assuming the best that if my husband says something that might feel kind of hurtful to me or straight up feels hurtful, I need to gain some clarity and be like, hey, I felt a little hurt when you said this. Now, I know you didn't say that to hurt me or to leave me hanging. So can we just talk about that a little bit more? Like, is there something, in this situation, we just hadn't communicated beforehand. It's like he got home and it was like, here's my agenda. And he's like, here's my agenda. And we were like, oh, okay, so these don't match up super well. And for both of us, it wasn't this fact of compromise. It was more of this, okay, like, yeah, there are other options here, and not making it mean anything about each other, but the fact that, okay, cool, right? Like, I love taking that perspective of like, okay, cool, like, and it's not like a resentment type thing, right? Like, not at all, or an anger, or even like suppressing what you actually feel. It's not that at all. It's just this mentality of, okay, cool, like, we can pivot, right? Like, that is one of the greatest gifts, is to be able to roll with things and not make them mean something that they aren't. We get so tied up in marriage too often because we make things mean things that they just aren't. And so emotional intelligence is about our willingness to pull back the curtains, look in the mirror, reach out to a trusted friend, or have a coach who's going to be able to hold up that mirror and show you your blind spots and help you to, in real time, in real life, walk through identifying the patterns and the processes that are getting you results but are not feeling good, and essentially that ceiling of where growth needs to occur. And until you learn to do this, husbands and wives, you will continue in the same frustrating patterns of emotional immaturity, which is reactive, which is selfish, which lacks self-control, which is looking for a result at no matter the cost or the hurt to you or your spouse. So are you willing, my friend, to get kicked in the teeth, if you haven't already today, and make these changes? And ask yourself, what in me needs to change? That is your big idea for today. What in me needs to change? And then walking in partnership with the Holy Spirit to change those things. There were a few verses that I wanted to share here with you. I think one of the biggest ones is Galatians 5:22 through 23. It says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law." So you need to understand that self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. And the only way to get the fruit of the Spirit is if you're abiding in the vine, which is Jesus, which is his word, and walking with him. It's by his power you're able to produce this fruit. It's not on your own striving. It's not on your own strength. On your own strength, you cannot do these things. It's abiding in him that you are able to produce this kind of fruit. Okay? And then James 1:19 through 20. "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." Okay? These patterns and processes you have that are not being quick to listen, that are not being slow to speak, that are not being slow to anger, these are producing hurt and the opposite of the righteousness of God, right? That he desires in you and in your marriage. So we need to challenge ourselves. Let your hearts be challenged. And then what are you going to do about it? And then the last thing is Philippians 4:6 through 7. This was my life verse in the darkest of valleys of my life when everything felt out of control, and it was. And it was about surrendering to the Lord. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That peace of God that surpasses all understanding, that is a direct blessing from the Lord that only He can pour on you, and only He can pour on you if you are surrendered and walking with Him in submission. So be challenged today and do something with it.
Thanks for hanging out with me today. And remember, you do not have to become something else to be loved. You just have to return to who God already created you to be, deeply you. If this episode blessed you, share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It really does help other women find the hope and healing you just received. And don't forget, your marriage, your peace, and your joy, it's not too far gone. Nothing is too broken for God to redeem or restore. God's just getting started.